I think you've covered so many interesting points. And now that's the discussion time. I'll
Yes.
probably start with a big question that a lot of people, I mean, that's on a lot of people's minds right now. With AI becoming more and more omnipresent, so running in all the gadgets and apps we use today, like email, Google, Microsoft software, you name it, will we even need to develop writing skills in the future?
Yeah, I mean, that is really interesting. And you could see that, especially from the chat in the beginning of the session. And there was lots of really interesting things like, is it their work or is where's the job satisfaction and things like that? And I think it all comes down to how we view the finished product of a text. And I think that's where the landscape has changed. 100% we still need to learn how to write, but maybe things have pivoted a little bit. It's the taking what is coming from AI, saving a bit of time and getting a lot of input that we can't necessarily get as quickly or as easily otherwise, and then adapting the skills we use, like the ones I mentioned, to create something. I think the phrase I keep using is something that is undeniably our own text. And I think that's the key bit, to take it from AI generated to something that's undeniably our own takes skills. They might be new skills, they might be slightly different to the old ones, but I think there's definite need for writing skills. Maybe more so than ever. Because I don't know about you guys, but every single DOS, every single person I talk to, every teacher is telling me they're just receiving just clearly AI generated text from their students who are just happily handing it in as their own. And it's not good enough. They're not good texts.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, there was a lovely comment by Penny in the chat. If people only learn by relying on AI, then do they know enough to use the language without the use of AI? And that was a very good question. So I was thinking, how can we actually stop students from relying too much on AI and outsourcing thinking to AI and make sure they still develop their own writing skills?
I think this is huge. And yeah, like I think Penny's got her hand up. So maybe after I answer this, we'll see if we can unmute Penny and see what she thinks, because I think she's got a lot of good ideas. Um, yes. So I see this as maybe the most important reason to bring AI tools into our classroom. It seems kind of mad to me that we could possibly ignore them, because our students are just going to use them. Not our students, people in the world are just going to use them. And unless we talk about them openly and train people on them, then we do risk, I don't know, a bit of dumbing down, but we do risk people letting AI do the thinking for them and producing what I just think is bad writing. If we want to keep the focus on good writing, then we need to teach them critical thinking. We need to teach them analyzing skills. We need them to stop accepting whatever sort of rubbish is thrown out by AI, and really being clear on what is fact, what is opinion, and what is their opinion, and then producing that in a text. But I don't know what you think. Does that ring true for you?
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. I believe that nowadays we cannot hide our heads in the sand, pretending that AI is not there.
Yeah.
And we need to equip our students for the future workplace as well. So again, traditional writing skills should be somehow augmented in a way. And now
Yeah.
we are talking about a new subset of skills that have to be there. So in addition to critical I mean, in general, when we talk about good texts, we should realize one thing. In essence, the ability to assess, and that was, I think, somewhere in the chat, there
Yeah.
was a question: how can we assess? Is there any tool to assess? The final tool is actually a human who will read the text and make this judgment whether the text is good or not, whether
Yeah.
it has the voice, right? The voice of the human. But to be able to assess the text, uh, our students should have knowledge,
Yeah.
right? So they should have writing skills, all the skills that we talk. I mean, during the instruction of traditional
Yeah.
writing skills. But in addition to that, they have to be able to evaluate the text itself.
Yeah.
And that's evaluation and make this judgment whether it's good or not. So we are talking about probably some new set of skills in terms of knowledge. They need to have certain expertise. And probably that's something, I mean, sometimes in the writing instruction, we talk about genre analysis, right? We use that, but not much. Probably that's the time when we should dig deeper into that with our
Yeah.
students and talk about specific vocab, specific structures that should be used, because AI has a certain voice, if you notice. Do you have
Yes.
any favorite vocab or structures that AI usually uses? Like when you see them, you know, that's
God,
AI generated for sure.
it's so funny, isn't it? It's the floral language in sort of like in a narrative. It's, you know, overly descriptive, but also super vague. Like I don't know how it manages to strike both, but it comes out every single time. People are constantly giving me like teachers sending me text going, "Do you think this is AI generated?" I'm like, "No, because there's a human behind that." Whereas something else will come in and it's just so clear that it's devoid of kind of feeling. I think you're right. It's that last test is the human. That's why I kind of mentioned the audience. One of the key skills we need is task achievement, is thinking about your audience, is making sure it is an effective text for your audience. Should we? I think Penny has her hand raised. I think if I click this button, the allowed to talk, Penny. I don't know if you want to have a chat. Hi, Penny.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, you can't see me.
No.
I mean, you don't need to see me, I guess. I've actually come on. I have done the CELTA course for teaching. My son actually also teaches English as a foreign language, so I said I would come on for him as well. I'm older, so I would probably sit here having come on this and said, I'm not convinced about AI. Not in terms of what you've shared. It sounds fantastic at one level. But at another level, obviously, having done everything myself over many, many years in HR and in consultancy work, the idea of getting these tools that actually are already being generated, in essence, would initially have left me cold. But you've explained it really well. So I want to say that to you absolutely up front. But I'm also interested because I'm writing a book and I haven't started, but I've done aspects of stories. And I wondered, you have to have knowledge. You must have knowledge up front. You have to understand the context in which you're asking. I think you covered that in the prompt. I think your concept of prompt is to look at the context in which you're asking this particular requirement of this skill. And then once you have those, you can evaluate what's written in front of you. I just fear that if you don't do the other skills first, so you don't use AI, that by the time they go back to relying on themselves, they're not going to have the confidence to believe what they can write is going to be as good as getting a robot to write for them, which effectively is what AI is. So, but I think you've explained it so well that I might actually just try it.
I think, look, get involved, try it out. Like, I think the biggest thing I can say on that is it's already happening. There's no which happens first and which happens second. It is happening all day long.
All the
People
time.
are writing texts. It will just get bigger and bigger and bigger. The tools are getting better and better. And, you know, even from when I started using ChatGPT to where it is now, and from when I started using Bard and now looking at Gemini and where it is now, it's, you know, streets ahead. It's only been, I don't know, a year or something like that. It's crazy how quickly it's come on and how ubiquitous it is. Like no technology before, like mobile phones didn't take on this quick, texting didn't take on this quick. AI is everywhere and people are using it. So while I do understand what you're saying, I think ship has sailed to some extent. We got to bring it in. We got to talk about it.
And can I just ask one final question? Are you familiar with this tool being used to write books?
Yes. Yeah.
And how are you required? And I mean, I would say you should, to actually say that I've had help writing this with AI.
So
Is
you're not
that legitimate? Is that
required that.
what's
I just
sorry?
like you're not required yet, and I mean, just like you can have ghostwriters writing a book and put your name on it, and you don't have to have the ghostwriter there. The big thing is though, they're bad books. It's
I would
not a
think,
good book, and you can see it immediately. And there's Amazon's riddled with AI generated books on famous people, biographies that they haven't
right.
commissioned, and you just look at them and go, "This is insanity!" It's worth having a look at some of them to see how bad they are. And I think to some extent that the more we know about it, the more of these we look at, the less in awe we are of AI, and the more we just see it as like a tool, like a calculator or something like that. It's not us. It's not a writer. It just produces texts, and that's where we come in to help people be better writers, essentially.
To effectively put their own voice in, and
That's it.
it can be a framework by which you rewrite it around that framework.
Exactly, that's it. It
Right.
becomes a text that is yours.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you. Thanks for
Yeah. I mean,
braving.
following on that, David, you mentioned a fantastic strategy that you're using with AI to write. And actually, that comes from machine learning. It's called flipped interaction pattern. When you basically change roles, it's not you given the task to the machine and then the machine produces a text, but the machine asks you questions to get enough information before it produces a certain output. And that's certainly your voice there. I mean, if you program it in such a way that it doesn't change in essence what you said, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it checks probably grammar, vocab, right? Then you get your own piece of writing. Yes, it's AI assisted, but you can clearly see your voice, you see your thoughts. Could you share this prompt with everybody else?
Yeah, I popped one. I don't know if it came through. Maybe you could tell me. In the chat window, I tried to put back a while now. I tried to put a little image that I used for it's come out as a clickable link. I don't know if people can open it and see it. That would seem to be the only way I could share it. But it's my favorite way to do anything with AI. The Risen framework is great. There's other ones out there. But that's my favorite way because it started asking me questions I hadn't set. And I was like, oh yeah, oh, that's important. Yeah. And you're right, it did produce something that was much more me. Now I have to say, it took some liberties. So I had to, you're never finished. You have to check at the end and go, wait a minute, I didn't say that. Oh, hang on. Yes, it was the file back there. I think it was a PNG.
PNG.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. So we can find that in the chat then.
Yeah. And so that's just from a report writing lesson that I did. And you set out the questions you want. The important thing is to say, ask me one at a time and wait for my answer before the next. And then it sort of becomes a conversation.
Well, it's actually a fantastic practice if you think about it. If your chatbot is voice enabled, then students can communicate with it, right? So these are speaking skills. And then it produces a piece of writing, and then they evaluate that piece of writing. So we have this beautiful combo of speaking and writing. And that's
it becomes a nice back and forth. I quite like it. We've got one little question there that just popped up and I saw it, which was interesting. What happens when AI becomes so advanced that it is impossible to detect it? What do you think, Lana?
Well, I think it has already become quite advanced. Whenever I love that quote from Ethan Mollick. I'm following Ethan Mollick. He's a pioneer in AI. And once he said that whenever you catch somebody using AI to generate your text, it means you catch people who are not really good at prompt crafting. And I think there is much truth in that. So that's somebody who produces a text, and actually the first draft is never good, right? But it takes some skill, and then you can turn it into human. And at the moment, it's already official. There are no detectors. that can detect whether the text is generated by AI or not.
No.
And then it has this bias against non-native speakers, because
Yes.
non-native speakers love using set expressions, right? Cliche phrases. And that's exactly what AI is about.
Yeah.
And that's why any text generated by a non-native speaker has a chance to be labeled as AI generated.
Yeah.
Although
Yeah.
even native speakers often submit their text that they wrote, like, I have one fellow blogger and he wrote a text in 2015 and he says, oh my gosh, my text has been generated by AI. It's like 97%.
This is very true. I mean, I remember reading an article a while back, and it was saying, you know, TOEFL essays are being unfairly flagged as being AI generated, just because TOEFL essays are not, you know, they can be quite vague, and you know, their arguments are quite. You're not required to make deep arguments and really dig into them. So I do think that is really interesting. I think as you say, to a certain extent, we are already there. Which then I think it's so important that our writing lessons incorporate, because our job is no longer, or should no longer be, to catch people out for using AI. It's to help people use AI to get something that is them and feels like them. And I think that's what I'm sort of trying to promote as much as possible. We've got another hand. Ilkham, yes, allowed to talk, definitely.
Hi, everyone. Hi, David. Thank you very much. Hi, it was a great presentation. Thank you very much for all the thought-provoking ideas. And I just would like to contribute to the last discussion about what Jolene introduced about this. I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, to some extent, or at some point, I think also AI might become just so advanced that it might write so well, but I think it has already, you know, written so well. But when we think about writing, I guess we need to think that it's kind of the organization of thoughts. It's something that, you know, it's the thinking process of a human being. So I think that's why it is always important to understand that although the vocabulary, the lexicon, the grammar might look so well, I think we need to consider or think about the fact that there is a thought process of a human being behind that.
Yeah.
So it depends on, okay, if we come to a point that some writing is done by a robot or by a tool, I think we need to, again, reconsider what we are teaching, what are we going to, I mean, what really we want our students to gain as skills. So I'm sorry, maybe it will be a little bit difficult in the short period, but in the long run, I think it's going to be transformed into something different. So writing will always be there. I mean, we will be talking about writing, organization, tone, style, planning, but maybe it's going to be in a different way.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? I think one thing I feel on this is a lot of people, whenever I tell people, there's this worry that, you know, writing's going to die out. And I'm like, well, why do we write? You know, I love writing. I don't write because I'm forced to. Now, I'll tell you, interestingly, there is an area of writing that I have completely stopped doing and handed over to AI. And that is, if I go to a conference, and it was actually someone else who gave me this idea at the last conference I was at, and I'm like, this is it now. This is all I will do, is I open a Word document, I put on the, you know, audio to write thing, whatever that's, transcription, and I just give a kind of a verbal dump of all my thoughts from the conference, copy it into Gemini and say, please turn this into a report for my manager or whatever. Ask me any questions you need. And in seconds, I have a report that I log, and I can go back to it anytime and check my opinions about that that conference.
That's being efficient. I think that's great.
And that's a bit of that's writing that took me seconds that I don't need to do. That's not joyful for me. But writing a story, writing a blog, writing a book, that's joyful for me. So I'm not going to give that to ChatGPT. I want to do that. So maybe there's space for us to grow that love of writing with our students.
I totally agree. And one last thing, I mean, people even just like they are taking long walks sometimes when they want to write books, and they do their brainstorming to the, you know, speech to text transcription tools, and then they organize them by themselves when they sit down in front of their computer, because it's like, right, because it's a process that goes on in your mind, and it's writing. So the same, sorry, I mean, I won't take longer. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for adding. There's a big question there from Jolene. What will happen to the future of work? I mean, it's a huge one. I don't know what you think, Lana. Do you think work will change? I mean, I think like it already has. It will continue to do so, much like our classrooms. It's that people keep rolling out that same old expression, isn't it? You won't lose your job to AI. You'll lose your job to someone who can use AI, and that's kind of it. I think that's where we are with this. Ooh, we've got lots coming through. Yeah, I think this is maybe hugely important. I don't know what you think about this, Lana, but that institutions and companies need to set policies and draw the lines for their students.
Valid and acknowledged. Well, policing, at the moment, there is much conversation about the policies we need to take, because again, we cannot label a text as AI generated. If, for example, you use Grammarly, is it AI generated? So each and every time you use Grammarly, is it an AI generated text? Or is it about the extent to which you use this or that AI tool? Do you use it just to proofread? Or do you use it to create a certain piece of writing? Or is it about brainstorming? If you use it to brainstorm certain ideas, right? Is it AI generated? So I think these are things, I mean, still we are exploring, right? We are exploring, trying to find out some possible solutions. What can be labeled as AI generated? What can't, right? But in essence, I think that's talking about the future. In the future, writing will be much easier, yet expertise and nuance will be the key points. Meaning that even if you generate a book, right, using some AI tool, who will be reading that book? That's the question. So if these are interesting ideas, if these are ideas coming from a human, I think that they will find their response, they will find their audience. But as such, I mean, these are just bad texts, as you say.
This is it. I think it does come back to that. Like I was chatting to someone the other day about this and going, you know, like if AI wrote a book and, you know, it was a fiction book in the genres I'd be interested in, and it was good, would I read it? I think I would. I mean, I think if it's good, I'd probably have a look at it. I just don't think we're there yet, from what I've seen that has been produced. But if, you know, I don't know, something's good, then it's okay. But I think, you know, for us, the main focus is getting our students to, and I think this is what we need to really, really focus in. It's getting students to create something that is theirs. And someone mentioned earlier, maybe it was Penny, about they're not building up their base of skills. And I feel they're building up potentially even more. This idea, and I kind of touched on it in the talk, but maybe didn't go into it enough. What I love is that in every single writing lesson that's ever been done, there is a model. There's a single narrow model of a text. Sometimes there's two to compare. Sometimes there's a good and there's a bad, but there's always a model. When you teach your students to write a prompt, you suddenly have as many models as there are students in your class, and each one of them can just keep getting more models. And what that allows us to do is it's like you've just created a corpus in your class, and you can look at the different the commonalities and the differences and go, oh, okay, if you write it in this way, it comes across a bit like this, but if you write it in this way, it comes across like this. So I really think we have an opportunity with AI to bring countless texts into our classroom in a way that we couldn't do just because of the amount of planning time it would take, the amount of writing time. So I really do. That is one of my favorite things, is teaching students to analyze it. So when they go to write their own, they have the language, they have the organization, and they've thought about their tone, which I think we maybe don't talk about enough in classroom. We often talk about formality and stuff, but maybe not how we want to come across. Do we want to be, interesting, engaged, disengaged? How do we want to come across?
Yeah, true. It's a bigger problem.
Got lots of things coming through.
Ideas and models. Okay. Actually, there is one question. I would like to focus on feedback, because you were mentioning feedback, that you use this tool for feedback for students.
Yeah.
At the same time, AI has certain weaknesses that teachers should be aware of, students should be aware of, and these are hallucinations and inconsistency. It means that, in essence, that's a tool that stitches words together in a very complicated, complex manner. Yet, sometimes things happen. It may stitch some wrong bits of information together because it doesn't know meaning. It doesn't have this knowledge, right? These are just words, actually tokens that are put in a string together. And sometimes this feedback may contain something that a teacher wouldn't like to have, or sometimes it invents certain things. So how do you monitor the feedback that AI provides to students?
Yeah, and again,
that's control. That's what I keep saying, like for AI for speaking, AI for writing. AI does not, I mean, it's not just about like our job is done, right? Students talk to AI and that's it, bingo, they develop their skills. The problem is that it's much more complicated. We have actually more work to do, because not only we have to assign tasks, we have to monitor all those interactions. Sometimes, I mean, things happen, right? It's not the ultimate source of truth.
No,
actually,
and this is it. But I think it's really important. It's important. Again, it's important to just bring it into the classroom and be talking about it, because they are going to get this feedback. And this is kind of what I mentioned earlier, of they're just accepting everything that comes from AI as being perfect and true and the finished product. And I think just like getting feedback from a human, it's potentially flawed and it's through a certain lens. And so I suppose the important thing is to let people know they don't have to take on every piece of feedback that comes their way. They can have a look at it and they can critically assess what they feel is important, is what they want to take on. So what I would say is, have that stage in the classroom occurring, have students talking about it together, and have the teacher bouncing around and sort of saying, I disagree with that. I think that's a very good point. Maybe you should take that on. But I think it's developing that critical thinking skill and that questioning skill. Because again, AI is here, it's going to give this stuff back. We need to be able to handle it. But I 100% agree. I was using a speaking AI tool, and I think there's a problem, like, obviously it's different kind of from what we're talking about, but the feedback it was giving me was that I was not speaking well or not speaking correctly, because I'm from Ireland, I'm from Dublin, I have an Irish accent, and I cut off a lot of my final t, and it was not very happy with me saying don't instead of don't. And so I think it gave me a score of like 70% native speaker or whatever it is. And it's these sort of, there's a lot of unhelpful feedback out there, especially on speaking, because I think it's hard to decide what model you're being judged about. With writing, I've found when I've put like articles in that I've written to get feedback, I've had some feedback that I thought, do you know what, I'm going to discount that, and some that I thought, that's a really good point, I'm gonna change that myself. So I think it's about teaching people to be critical as much as possible.
Yeah. Do you give to your students the prompts, like particular prompts, or do you teach them how to prompt?
I think both. I think, yeah, it's, you need people to be creating their own prompts, because just like we talked about the single model in a writing lesson, if we're only giving one and saying this is the only way, then it's not going to give them that flexibility to deal with responses that aren't quite what they need. So they need to sort of be able to write their own. So I think it's good to give frameworks. The way we're currently sort of running it is sort of a 4-week course in which people look at prompts each week, and people look at a different text each week. And so they're gradually developing the prompt writing skills. We begin with something like Risen, so that it's like narrowish, but you still write your own. And then we sort of grow their awareness of prompt writing. But I really think the more these are the kind of things that should just become part of every writing lesson. So much like an awareness of organization or genre, students will gradually develop it as they're doing these lessons.
Yeah.
Voice recognition elevator. It's funny. Oh yeah, I've seen that one. But
yeah, that's 11.
Yeah. But it's funny, isn't it? All the I think we have to be careful with AI that we don't take a step back into the past, because it's these amazing tools that are driving us forward in so many ways. But things like writing tools or speaking tools referring to native speakers and things like that, which, that's, I would say we've moved beyond that quite a lot as an industry, I hope. But that's an easier model for AI to compare people against. It's just flawed and not correct, really. And so with writing, we have to be careful. You mentioned that there's a lot of weird turns of phrase within AI, but the more we can raise awareness of that and hopefully show students how to play with language and be a bit more playful, then hopefully we can drive it forward and not get stuck in the past.
Yeah, true. That's a great point. Actually, we were talking about self-esteem, student self-esteem, right? When they get feedback from AI, from any AI chatbot. And that's quite interesting, because my students seem to be kind of like they love the feedback from AI in a way, because it's not that critical, they say, because that's a robot, right? Robots never judge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's yeah, in this sense, that's probably a good thing. At the same time, I see some situations when student self-esteem somehow gets a bit, I mean, they do not see their writing skills in that light as before. So somehow at times it may impact their self-esteem. Have you seen anything of the kind with your students? Have you observed it?
So what I've seen when I've looked at classes and spoken to teachers who are doing it as well, it tends to be like you said, that they are more likely to take feedback from AI. They quite like it. They sort of feel like it's not that it's not real or anything, but yeah, they don't take it personally. They feel like maybe it feels a bit more objective or something like that, even though I suppose, yeah, we don't want to think of AI as being subjective, so maybe it is more objective. That doesn't mean it is correct; it just means it's objective. But yeah, no, I've seen mostly that they're more open to it, and I think you're also, it's easier to disagree with AI as well. Like it's easier to just go, nah, I don't think that's true. It's
Yeah,
just
and
AI.
then it will agree with you. That's the issue, right? It will always agree.
Yeah, it is amazing the more, and again, like hopefully if people here aren't using AI regularly, hopefully you will go and try some things out after this. But it's mad. Like I know people are against it, are in awe of it, but it is so flawed. It's great, it's a tool, it can be used in certain ways, but it's so flawed. Like the absolute madness that comes out of it, and how you can ask it to give you one opinion and then give you the opposite. And I think this is something really important to be showing our students, because like, I don't know about you, but I'm getting emails every single day that are clearly AI generated from companies like, soliciting services or whatever like that. And we're just going to see more and more and more content online created by AI tools, and we need, like, even outside of writing skills, in sort of reading skills, we need them to be asking questions of these, because it's everywhere now.
Yeah. Have you faced any unexpected challenges or pushback from fellow teachers or students when adding AI to writing instruction?
Yeah. Yeah. No students. Not that
The students
seems to
are
be fine.
okay, right?
Yeah. Students seem fine. But 100%, yeah. There's. I feel like in any school, you've got, like, if there's like 10 teachers or whatever, you'll have one or two who are 100% on board, taking it on, running with it. They're already using it in their lessons to do various things. You'll have another four who are kind of like, I'm interested in learning more, but I'm a bit nervous, and you can sort of work those. And you'll have another group who, no, it's just a straight no, don't want to know. It's not for me. I think a lot of it is fear, and I understand that. I really do. It's, if you don't feel comfortable, if you don't feel like you're entirely across something, you don't want to bring it into your lesson, because you don't know what will happen. And you just you want to be confident that you know how something's going to go. But I think the thing is, it's our students are using it already, and as I said, the ship has sailed. We just need to get on board. That's why that first step, just do one thing, bring it into your lesson one time, and you'll see how easy it is to use.
Yeah, so for those teachers who would like to take their first step, which tools would you recommend? I mean, you mentioned Gemini as your favorite tool, and then ChatGPT, right, from OpenAI.
Yeah, I think
But these
Gemini
are
at the moment,
universal chatbots, right? They are not designed as writing assistants in essence. These are universal chatbots. They can code, they can do whatever you want them to do.
I think that's why
Right?
they're
But
my
there are some
favorite.
customizable chatbots like writing assistants for students. Have you tried
So I've tried
such
various
chatbots?
ones of them. So I think Grammarly is quite user friendly. I think it's quite good. And in terms of like crafting a text that is kind of yours, like we talked about earlier, that conversation with AI, I think Grammarly is quite good at that. I think it does sort of, I don't know, gives sometimes almost too much feedback, and I don't love that. I think that's why I'm much less likely to recommend an AI tool that is specifically for something, and much more likely to use the Geminis and things like that, where you work with it to create what you want. I think it's better that it's led by us than that we're led by it. That's kind of my approach with AI tools. I mean, I feel like that a lot with, if I have a vision for a lesson and I use, ChatGPT or something to give me ideas for text or lists of vocabulary that I might want to bring in, or to ask it for feedback on something, I feel like I'm creating my one. If I use something like Twee, which is incredible and you can do amazing things, and I'll sometimes use Twee to get 4 opinions. There's a lovely 4 opinion thing you can do on it. I find that really good, but I find I'm being led by it to create its lesson, not my lesson, my way. And so I suppose it is just how you use them. But I think that's my general approach. I don't know, how about yourself?
Well, same here, same here. I actually I've developed a few apps basically for myself, but then I share them with other teachers, like a role play generator, anti-quiz maker, or anti-quiz generator. But again, in essence, when I make such apps, I know that that's my pedagogy, these are my ideas, that's my teaching expertise, which is there, and I can rely on them. I mean, I could cherry pick, right, what I would like to take, what I wouldn't. But in essence, these are my lessons, these are my activities, that's my work. And I love my work. I wouldn't like to outsource it to any AI.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? Like I really, and it comes, I think one of the ways that people like in our industry are using AI is to create lesson plans, or to create lessons, not necessarily lesson plans. And is that our work? And I think it is, as long as you are guiding what's being created and you are using it to create your own thing, I think then yeah, definitely. And so it's the same as with our students. If we're going to create lessons that are effective, we need to be able to analyze what's there, think if it's relevant, think if it's appropriate, think if it's in the right order, think if the rubric needs think if the distractors work properly. Exactly the same with students. We need to teach them to lead AI and not be led by, where they currently seem to be at the moment. I don't know, maybe that is a nice sort of a point to kind of leave it, I think, because I think really that is the key thing about everything we've chatted about today, though, is to to create things that are undeniably ours and not to be led by AI to create things that is AI and is not us. I think that might be a nice
keeping our
summary.
voice, right?
Yeah, exactly. Keeping our voice, what is our voice? And I think it's so funny. I write with my writing partner, and you can always, like, by the time we've finished a book or something, we've made sure that it's both of us and it's throughout. But if we start writing a submission, you'll always go, oh, that was David, that was Mark, that's very much us. We have a style, I'm much more chatty and he's much more academic, and we balance each other out. But it's very interesting how we all have our own voice, and when you're writing in a second language, it's not as easy to access that voice sometimes. So I really think this whole thing of voice and tone and knowing how we want to come across is a positive addition to a writing skills class, and not just something to do with AI. And I think that's the key is these are writing skills lessons. AI is just in there. It's not an AI lesson. It's not an AI skills. It's not an IT skills lesson. It's very much writing.